Q&A Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @Q&A Review, that is @ CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@QuenReview.com. That is INFORMATION @CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
The Herald Scotland on Wednesday the 4th of August 2024. From the news section. Emergency roadworks on Pollokshaws Road could take weeks. This article was written by Jodie Harrison and it's being read by me, Corey. Motorists navigating a busy commuter route through Glasgow faced traffic misery after emergency repairs were announced. Scottish Water has warned of disruption and put a traffic management plan in place along Pollokshaws Road on the city's south side to deal with an ongoing sewer leak. The Water Authority said that a nearby property had experienced flooding, and the source of the leak was traced to a pipe buried 5 metres below the pavement outside. One lane of the major road has been closed, with traffic lights controlling the flow of traffic between Langside Avenue and Minard Road. There is no timescale for the work, which is being carried out by heavy machinery. Pollokshaws Road, which merges into Kilmarnock Road, is the main thoroughfare through Shawlands and leads to Giffnock and East Renfrewshire. Initial investigations suggest it will take until early October of 2024 to complete the repair and reinstate the road and pavement. A Scottish Water spokesperson said, "This is an urgent repair, and unfortunately, given the location and depth of the damaged section of the sewer, some disruption is inevitable. We are using specialist heavy machinery, which requires a lane closure to keep our team and road users safe while the work progresses. We appreciate there will be delays and would like to thank everyone affected for their patience and understanding while we carry out this much needed repair." That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Jodie Harrison and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland on Wednesday the 4th of August 2024. From the news section. Investigation underway to remove dead whale from Angus Beach. This article was written by Jodie Harrison and it's being read by me, Corey. People have been advised to stay away from a popular beach after a huge whale carcass washed ashore on the tide. The dead sea mammal was spotted in the surf at Lunan Bay near Arbroath, prompting locals to urge people to stay clear. Local authority Angus Council is currently investigating how to deal with the decomposing remains, thought to be of a 25-foot long minke whale. It is feared that the animal could have been entangled in fishing gear before its death, but it is too decomposed for an investigation to take place. The nearby Lunan Farm campsite and shop shared images of the carcass, warning locals and dog walkers to take care visiting the popular beauty spot. The cafe wrote on its Facebook page, "We want to inform all visitors, especially those with dogs, to be extra careful when visiting Lunan Bay tomorrow. A whale was sadly washed ashore on our beautiful beach, and while efforts are underway to manage the situation, we advise keeping your pets on a leash and away from the area for their safety. We appreciate your understanding and cooperation during this time. Our cafe will be open as usual, offering a warm place to relax while you enjoy the coastal views from a safe distance. Thank you for helping us keep Lunan Bay safe and enjoyable for everyone. Angus Council said an investigation is underway to decide what action is appropriate. A council spokesperson said, "Officers have attended Lunan Bay to carry out investigations relating to a stranded whale carcass. We continue to consult with local landowners and stakeholders such as SEPA and the Scottish Marine Animal Stranding Scheme to ensure appropriate action is taken going forward to remove the whale." The Scottish Marine Animal Stranding Scheme said it had been made aware of the incident. Its spokesman said, "It was reported to us around midday on Monday. Unfortunately, it's too decomposed for us to necropsy or sample. However, there are lesions on the animal consistent with it being an entanglement case." That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Jodie Harrison, and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 4th of August 2024. From the news section. Stagecoach bus drivers receive inflation-beating pay rise. This article was written by Josh Carmichael, and it's being read by me, Corey. Around 300 bus drivers are set for a significant pay uplift after a successful series of talks. Unite the Union confirmed on Wednesday, the 4th of September, that around 300 stagecoach drivers in Strathtae and Perth have overwhelmingly backed the pay rise, which has been described as inflation-beating. The 16-month pay deal will see the stagecoach drivers across Strathtae and Perth receiving a 7.1% pay award, with the deal coming into effect on the 1st of September 2024. The pay deal was supported by 77% of Unite's membership, and will now bring the drivers' basic hourly pay up to £15 per hour, and the overtime rate will also increase to £18.26. Unite General Secretary Sharon Graham said, "The pay deal is a significant boost to our Stagecoach, Strathtae and Perth members' take-home pay. This is another win for Unite in driving up the jobs, pay and conditions of our members in Scotland's bus industry." Stagecoach has also committed to reviewing the existing pay deal in August of 2025, with a potential view for an additional pay increase. However, it will depend on the company's financial performance over the next year. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Josh Carmichael, and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 4th of August 2024. From the news section. Remarkable Pictish ring buried for 1,000 years, found by amateur. This article was written by Jodie Harrison, and it's being read by me, Corey. An amateur archaeologist has told of his excitement after finding a Pictish ring buried for more than 1,000 years on the last day of a dig. The kite-shaped ring has a garnet or red glass centre and was discovered at Burghead Fort, Moray, by volunteer John Ralph, a former engineer and graduate of the University of Aberdeen. The area is known as a former Pictish site, but its historical value was assumed to have been lost when the town of Burghead was constructed in the 1800s, covering much of the fort and dismantling the stone that remained to be used for building new homes. The timing of the find also marks the 50th year of Mr. Ralph's association with the University of Aberdeen. The 68-year-old grew up in the area and joined the university as an undergraduate in 1974 and completed both his engineering degree and a PhD at the institution. Mr. Ralph's ancestors moved to Burghead in support of the fishing industry, and years later He signed up as a volunteer for excavations there after seeing a post by Aberdeen University archaeological professor Gordon Noble. Mr. Ralph, who described himself as an enthusiastic amateur, said that upon discovering the ring, he did not realise it was actually something of value. Speaking of the find, he said, "My sister still lives in Burghead, and it sounded interesting, so I thought, why not? I have now joined 3 different digs there, each for 2 weeks. I thoroughly enjoyed them all, but my initial enthusiasm for finds was somewhat dented by my knack of getting excited for shiny pebbles. I had found a few interesting items, including bone pins, and it was great being part of the team, which was the real draw. So when I picked up a bit of earth from the final trench on the last day of excavations, I thought, here we go again. It was only when I showed it to the volunteer next to me and he got excited that I thought it might really be something." He added, "My ancestors were part of the movement of people encouraged into the new town to support the fishing industry, the reason that much of what remained of the fort was destroyed. It is good to think that I have given something back to this little piece of the puzzle of the past. I like to think of archaeology as a dot-to-dot picture, and I am delighted to have been able to make my own little mark." Mr. Ralph said it is a real thrill to have probably been the first person to have seen the ring in 1,000 to 1,500 years. It becomes a real guessing game of who owned it, what did they use it for, and how was it lost, he said. Professor Noble, who has led excavation work funded by Historical Environment Scotland for the last 3 years, said the find was truly remarkable. He said, "John was digging and then came over and said, 'Look what I found.' What he handed over was incredible. Even before the conservation work, we could see it was something really exciting, as despite more than 1,000 years in the ground, we could see glints of the possible garnet setting. There are very few Pictish rings which have ever been discovered, and those we do know about usually come from hoards, which were placed in the ground deliberately for safekeeping in some way. We certainly didn't expect to find something like this lying around the floor of what was once a house. But that had appeared of low significance, so, in typical fashion, we had left work on it until the final day of the dig. The ring has been passed to the National Museum of Scotland's Post-Excavation Service for analysis." Professor Noble added, "We will now look at the ring, evidence of buildings and other artefacts to consider whether the ring was crafted on the site and who such an important piece of jewellery might have been made for. We have some other evidence of metal working, and the number of buildings we have uncovered is quite striking. This further indicator of the high status production of metal work as to the growing evidence that Burghead was a really significant seat of power in the Pictish period." Susan O'Connor, head of grants at Historic Environment Scotland, said, "Whilst the materials used themselves are not particularly valuable in today's monetary sense, this find is hugely significant for what it tells us about Pictish lives and society. We're excited to find out more once our colleagues in the National Museum have finished their investigations." That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Jodie Harrison, and it was read by me, Corey.
The Herald, Friday the 6th of September, from the news section. Abortion clinic buffer zones to take effect from the 24th of September. Legislation creating buffer zones around abortion clinics in Scotland banning any protests or vigils there will come into force on September the 24th. The Abortion Services Safe Access Zones Scotland Bill was passed in June and creates 200-metre areas around medical facilities where terminations are performed to stop anti-abortion protesters gathering. The legislation, designed to protect women from harassment, was overwhelmingly backed by MSPs, with only one voting against it. Green MSP Gillian Mackay's Members' Bill was supported by campaign group Back Off Scotland and the British Pregnancy Advisory Service. And British Pregnancy Advisory Service said it was delighted when it was passed. The commencement date for the legislation will be September the 24th, with 30 clinics in Scotland subject to the Safe Access Zone provisions. Ms Mackay said, "This is a pivotal moment for reproductive rights in Scotland. Far too long, women all over Scotland have been forced to endure gauntlets of protesters with graphic banners and sometimes even megaphones, trying to stop them from accessing the healthcare they are entitled to. It is organised intimidation and harassment, and it is wrong." The protesters have heard the same testimony as I have, and know all about the pain, distress and hurt that they are causing for patients and medical staff. Now at last we are only weeks away from stopping them for good. It has taken a lot of work from a lot of people to get to this point. I want to thank the Scottish Government and Parliament staff for all of their support. I also want to thank the medical bodies and campaign groups who have done so much to support my act and to keep it at the top of the public agenda, including BMA Scotland, Back Off Scotland and the STUC Women's Committee. Above all, I want to thank everyone who took the time to share what I know were difficult and traumatic experiences with me, and who made this act as strong and robust as it can be. It should never have happened, and I hope that nobody else will have to go through what they have. The only MSP to oppose the law was John Mason, who is currently suspended from the SNP group at Holyrood. A number of religious groups who opposed the bill have told MSPs that silent vigils and prayers will be criminalised by the new law. The law makes it an offence to intentionally or recklessly influence another person's decision to access abortion services within the safe access zones. Examples of doing so include holding up signs with anti-abortion messages, physically blocking the entrances to protected premises, and protesting. Those convicted of offences under the law can be fined by the courts. This was an article by Jodie Harrison. The Herald, Friday the 6th of September, from the news section. Fire crews battle through the night to contain a city blaze. Fire crews battled through the night to contain a fire which tore through the roof of a block of flats. 6 fire engines and a high-reach appliance were sent to the site of the blaze in a residential building in Graham Place, Dundee, close to its junction with Princess Street. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, SFRS, said that the crews remained in attendance this morning, having worked through the night to bring the fire under control. Footage from the scene shows flames climbing high into the night sky from the building's shattered roof timbers, while emergency crews tried to douse the building with water. A thick plume of smoke from the fire, which was reported at 8:40 p.m, also drifted over the city and was visible for several miles. There have been no reported casualties at this time. A spokesperson for SFRS said last night, "We were alerted at 8:40 p.m. on Thursday the 5th of September to reports of a fire within a residential building on Graham Place in Dundee. Operations Control mobilised 6 fire engines and a height appliance to the scene. They added, this morning, crews remain in attendance at the scene." That was an article by Jodie Harrison. The Herald, Friday the 6th of September, from the news section. Funding boost for Scots biologists who developed cancer-treating drug. Biology researchers who developed a drug to treat skin cancer are to receive almost £30 million in funding in order to help treat even more diseases. The research unit, based at the University of Dundee, was awarded the funding by the UK government on Thursday, which will allow them to continue their work for another 5 years. The Medical Research Council, or MRC, and Protein Phosphorylation and Ubiquitination Unit, PPR, has been a part of the development and clinical approval of more than 40 drugs, and it is hoped that improving the understanding of the processes within cells could be the basis for treating Parkinson's to Crohn's and celiac disease. Their work has already delivered a drug that is now widely used to treat melanoma, the most dangerous form of skin cancer, and they have also helped to develop a new drug to treat Parkinson's disease, which is currently undergoing clinical trials. The 200-strong scientific staff and students at the university are now using modern technology and biochemistry to explore how signals within the body's cells are transmitted. It will receive the funding allocated by the UK Research and Innovation UKKRI to bolster its studies in cell biology. Science and Technology Secretary Peter Kyle said, "As we embark on a decade of national renewal, the higher educational sector has a profound role to play in every piece of work we'll need to do to build a Britain that delivers for working people, from seizing the potential of clean energy to rebuilding the NHS. I will always champion our universities. They are society's most powerful engines for innovation, aspiration, economic growth, and the creation of better lives for all, which is why investing in their work, like this £30 million in funding, is so important." Science Minister Lord Valence told the PA News Agency, "The research is deeply impressive." He said, "I don't know what they're going to discover, but that's the whole point. They're going to discover new things that can't be predicted, and they're going to do that in a way that's high quality and accessible for others to see." Lord Valence added, "They're a very high quality team. They track some of the best researchers to come to University of Dundee. And, of course, because of what they discover and the way they make it available to the industry, there's also an important economic benefit. They create growth and they create wealth creation, so I think it's a pretty impressive setup they've got in Dundee." He said how cells communicate is a fundamental question about what goes wrong in terms of disease. This unit has been at the forefront of trying to understand that by looking at proteins and how proteins are modified, he said. So it's carrying messages that have led to the identification of new ways of treating diseases. It has been used for Parkinson's disease, it's been used for cancers. It's going to be important in other diseases in future. The new drug for Parkinson's, created alongside partner organisations, is currently undergoing clinical trials. Professor Patrick Chinnery, Executive Chairman of the MRC, said, "The MRC are proud to be investing for a further 5 years in the exceptional research of the MRC PPU in Dundee. They are leaders in conducting rigorous fundamental research and then working with industry to translate these breakthroughs for patient benefit. The MRC PPU have an outstanding culture of collaboration and sharing their leading research expertise, products and techniques with the wider scientific community." That was an article by Jodie Harrison. The Herald, Friday the 6th of September, from the news section. SNP finances. Police seek next steps from prosecutors. Police Scotland has asked prosecutors for direction into the next steps of the SNP finances investigation, which involves former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. Officers have sent an updated advice and guidance report to the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, it is understood. The Crown Office has said the report relates to former party chief executive Peter Morrell, who was arrested and charged in connection with alleged embezzlement of party funds. Former First Minister Miss Sturgeon and the party's then Treasurer Colin Beattie were both arrested and released without charge in 2023. Mr Morrell, who married Miss Sturgeon in 2010, was initially arrested last year, before being re-arrested and charged on April the 18th, 2024. In the first arrest, Police Scotland searched the couple's home and erected a blue tent outside the property, while also carrying out searches of the SNP's Edinburgh headquarters. The police probe, known as Operation Branchform, was launched in 2021 to investigate how £666,953 of crowdfunding donations was spent by the party. Miss Sturgeon and Mr Beattie have not been charged, and Police Scotland's Chief Constable Joe Farrell confirmed last month the pair were still under investigation. Police Scotland have now released an updated statement which said, On August the 9th, 2024, we presented the findings of the investigation so far to the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, and we await their direction on what further action should be taken. The Crown Office said the matter was still under investigation and reiterated the statement given in May, which said a standard procuration report has been received by the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service from Police Scotland in relation to a 59-year-old man and incidents said to have occurred between 2016 and 2023. Connected investigations of two other individuals, a man aged 72 and a 53-year-old woman, remain ongoing. Professional prosecutors from the Crown Office and Independent Counsel will review this report. They will make decisions on the next steps without involving the Lord Advocate or Solicitor General. All Scotland's prosecutors operate independently of political influence. Miss Sturgeon has repeatedly told journalists she had done nothing wrong. This is an article by Rebecca McCurdy. The Herald, Monday the 9th of September, from the news section. New Govan Partick Bridge absent from Google Maps. It is one of the longest pedestrian bridges in Europe and certainly the newest way to walk over water in Scotland. But it appears that no one has told Google about the Govan Partick Bridge, with the tech giant's map and directions features seemingly unaware it is there. As of Monday, the bridge remains a missing link, and his absence from maps of the area, with people directed to other crossings, potentially adding an hour to their journey on foot and extra minutes by bike. The bridge, which crosses the Clyde between the Riverside Museum and Water Row, officially opened at the weekend with a street party and music festival. Thousands made their first crossing, but as of today, one of the world's biggest internet companies appeared none the wiser. Local Govan councillor Dan Hutchison of the Scottish Greens asked Google to act with urgency to add the new bridge to their maps. Councillor Hutchison said the opening of the Govan Partick Bridge saw thousands of people walking and cycling over the new bridge on Saturday, but now they won't be able to use functions like Google Maps to utilise the bridge. I'm hopeful that Google will act to add it today and the core walking and cycling route that was designed to be will be fulfilled. The bridge, which crosses the Clyde between the Riverside Museum and Water Row and spans 110 metres, cost more than £29 billion to build. Currently, the quickest route on Google Maps between Water Row and Point House Quay is via the Bells and Millennium Bridges, which Google Maps advises will take 11 minutes by bike and 47 minutes on foot, not taking the new bridge into account. Government ministers and local school children say the bridge will connect people living in Govan to the north side of the city and vice versa. It will also provide a direct route for students travelling between the University of Glasgow's Gilmore Hill campus and the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. Originally meant to be open 3 years ago, the project faced several delays before finally getting off the ground in April 2022. The bridge was constructed as part of the Glasgow City Region deal, which will see £1 billion contributed by the UK and Scottish governments to benefit infrastructure projects. Google has been approached for comment. That was an article by Jodie Harrison. The Herald, Monday the 9th of September, from the news section. Robison slammed for £460 million ScotWind raid. Finance Secretary Shona Robison has been likened to Margaret Thatcher following the government's £460 million ScotWind cash grab. The GMB criticised the government for frittering away money from leasing Scotland's seabed, rather than using it for the promised energy transition. In a stinging letter to the Minister, Louise Gilmore, the Union's Scotland Secretary, said it was also wrong for the government to suggest that public sector pay deals caused the £500 million cuts to spending. She said ministers were repeatedly warned that the public pay strategy was unfit for purpose. The Finance Secretary emptied the Renewable Energy Fund in a pre-budget fiscal update last week. The money was originally raised from an auction of seabed leases to companies planning to build offshore wind farms. There were 20 projects approved in 2022, raising £756 million in fees, which the government said at the time would tackle the twin climate and biodiversity crises. However, ministers have already dipped into the fund, taking $96 million in 2022-23 and another $200 million used this year. There had been plans to use some of the money in 2023-24, but it was never drawn down. No additional funds from Scotland are expected until electricity generation begins, likely closer to 2030. In our letter to Miss Gilmore, said using £460 million of ScotWind income to plug the gap in Scotland's finances was unsustainable and represents poor financial planning. She added, "For our members in energy, it yet again obliterates the claim of a just transition. These funds should have been used to build the renewable supply chains across Scotland. Instead, they have been squandered. Our Harland and Wolff members are facing yet another crisis and are in need of investment. Grangemouth is on the brink of ending refining operations, and oil and gas members face decimation via taxation with no green jobs to step into." Just as Thatcher raided Scotland's oil and gas profits, preventing the creation of a sovereign wealth fund akin to that of Norway, Scotland's future in renewable is now being frittered away. Failing to invest and plan in the future of our energy network undermines the Scottish Government's own ability to fund future spending in the public sector. Much of the black hole in the public finances comes from a higher than expected public sector pay bill of around £800 million. Miss Gilmer said that was the government's own fault for failing to prepare accordingly. She said unions had made clear to Scottish ministers that the public sector pay strategy did not meet our members' expectations on pay. The decision to then adhere to the strategy and not financially plan accordingly was one made by Scottish ministers, not trade unions, she added. Miss Gilmer also said it was time for the Scottish Government to seriously look at the inherently unfair council tax and at the very least refuse to freeze it next year. If the freeze is not lifted, Scottish ministers will be placing the exact same restraints on local government that the UK government is placing on the Scottish government. Miss Robeson was asked about ScotWind funding last week during an interview with the BBC. She said how much she used depended on the UK government. The real crux comes down to how much of the UK pay review body pay deals, how much of that is funded by the UK government, she said. If more of it is funded, I will have to draw down less of the ScotWind. If less of it is funded, I will have to draw down more of the ScotWind. So we will have to see where we end up. The Finance Secretary continued, "I don't want to deploy all of the £460 million I announced yesterday. That will depend on how much of the pay settlements are supported through UK government funding. If more is supported, I can draw down less of that money, and I want to draw down less of that money." A Scottish Government spokesperson said, "We have consistently warned of the pressure on the public finances from prolonged Westminster austerity, Brexit and the cost of living crisis. Following the UK Chancellor's July statement, we face the most challenging financial situation since devolution. This requires tough choices to ensure funding can be directed towards the priorities, including public sector pay. Salaries in Scotland are 6% higher on average than the rest of the UK, with the lowest paid earning 10% more than their counterparts. Our support also contributes to nearly 90% of people in Scotland being paid at least the real living wage. We have done so without equivalent action from the UK government. Under current constitutional arrangements, in-year pressures can only be managed within the budget available, and we are seeking to protect ScotWind revenue." That was an exclusive article by Andrew Lermonth. The Herald, Monday the 9th of September, from the news section. SNP urges Scottish Labour MPs to vote against winter fuel cuts. The SNP Stephen Flynn has urged Labour MPs to break the whip and vote against plans to cut the winter fuel allowance. His call comes as Sir Keir Starmer refuses to rule out suspending any MP who rebels against the government in the Commons tomorrow night. The Prime Minister said he expects his MPs to back the unpopular measure. "That will be a matter for the Chief Whip," he told BBC One Sunday Laura with Koonsberg. "We're going into a vote. I'm glad we're having a vote because I think it's very important for Parliament to speak on this. But every Labour MP was elected on the same mandate as I was, which was to deliver the change that we need for the country. I'm absolutely convinced that we will only deliver that change. I'm absolutely determined we will if we do the difficult things. Now I know they're unpopular, I know they're difficult, of course they're tough choices. Tough decisions are tough decisions. Popular decisions aren't tough, they're easy. I do recognise how difficult it is for some people. I do recognise it's really hard for some pensioners. But of course they do rely on the NHS. They do rely on public transport. So these things aren't completely divorced. Chancellor Rachel Reeves announced in July that the annual payout in England and Wales would be restricted to those on pension credit or certain other benefits as part of her plan to tackle a £22 billion back hole. That left the Scottish Government with a £160 million funding shortfall, forcing them to follow suit. The policy is expected to reduce the number of pensioners in receipt of the up to £300 payment by 10 million, from 11.4 million to 1.5 million, saving around 1.4 billion this year. A number of MPs are expected to rebel when MPs come to vote on the Tory motion to annul the government's change to the regulations. Rosie Duffield, the Labour MP for Canterbury, has already said she will not vote with the government. Another 10 Labour MPs have signed an early day motion which describes the plan as a bureaucratic and unpopular means test for pensioners. However, given the size of Labour's majority, there is no chance of the Prime Minister being defeated. In a letter to Scottish Labour MPs and party leader Anas Sarwar, Mr Flynn pointed to an analysis by the House of Commons Library which showed the number of Scottish pensioners could drop from 991,431 to 126,088. Mr Flynn wrote, "The Labour government doesn't need to wield the axe and make these cuts. It is a political choice driven by your obsession with copying Tory fiscal rules." Up to 87% of pensioners in Scotland will lose out under Labour government plans, including those on a low and modest income who are just above the pension credit threshold of £11,343 a year. This is not the change people in Scotland were promised, and it breaks the personal pledge you made to voters during the election: read my lips, no austerity under Labour. Mr Flynn added, the last UK government hammered the economy, public services and household incomes by imposing 14 years of cuts and Brexit. The last thing the UK needs now is more cuts from the Labour Party, and pensioners will face a bitter winter if these cuts go ahead. Paul Novak, General Secretary of the TUC, said he had real concerns about cuts to the winter fuel allowance, but added that Labour was dealing with a toxic economic legacy. He told a press conference ahead of the annual TUC Congress in Brighton, "I don't want to see any pensioner going into winter afraid to turn on the heating. So yes, I have concerns, but I recognise the difficult legacy that's been left. I hope that in the budget we can see proper support for pensioners and others who might be struggling, but I am also worried about the level of support for people wanting to go back to work, or about our members who are scared stiff of losing their job." Health Secretary Wes Streeting told Sky News, "I think it's a tough choice, and we've had plenty of political criticism for it, I think, which demonstrates the political pain of it. I'm not remotely happy about it, and I'm not remotely happy about having to say to some of my constituents, I'm sorry that I'm going into work this week to vote for something that will take money away from you. Nevertheless," he said, "pensioners have seen what happens when politicians duck the difficult decisions," adding, "This isn't a government that ducks difficult decisions or pretends you can spend money you don't have." That was an article by Andrew Lermonth. Herald, Monday the 9th of September, from the news section. UK COVID inquiry to examine impact of pandemic on healthcare. The impact of the COVID pandemic on NHS workers, patients and the delivery of healthcare is set to be examined by a public inquiry. The first public hearings of Module 3 of the UK COVID-19 inquiry will be held on Monday, with leaders from the Health and Safety Executive and Unison expected to give evidence this week. This part of the inquiry is looking at the governmental and societal response to COVID-19 by assessing the impact of the pandemic on how NHS services were delivered. This will include how managers led the pandemic response, the role of primary care and GPs, NHS backlogs, and how the vaccine programme was integrated. The diagnosis of long COVID and the support offered to those affected will also be examined. Evidence this week will come from COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice, Dr. Barry Jones, Chair of the COVID-19 Airborne Transmission Alliance, Richard Brunt, Director of Engagement and Policy Division at the Health and Safety Executive, and Sarah Gorton, Head of Health at Unison. Nicola Brooke, Solicitor at Browdy Jackson Cantor, which represents more than 7,000 families from the COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice UK group, said this module of the inquiry is one of the most important in understanding the true horrors of the pandemic. It will reveal some of the most shocking details, distressing stories and outrageous scandals that took place. Despite the narrative peddled by those in charge that the UK coped, the sad fact is people died unnecessarily. Groups like the disabled and elderly were written off because it was considered that their lives were not worth saving. In July, the inquiry's first report into preparedness for a pandemic found the UK government and the civil service failed the public due to significant flaws. It said there was a damaging absence of focus on the measures and infrastructure that would be needed to deal with a fast-spreading disease, even though a coronavirus outbreak at pandemic scale was foreseeable. Chair Baroness Heather Hallett said lessons must be learned because, unless changes are made, the next pandemic will bring with it immense suffering and huge financial cost, and the most vulnerable in society will suffer the most. She added there were serious errors on the part of the state and serious flaws in our civil emergency systems. This cannot be allowed to happen again. The public hearings for Module 3 are expected to run for 10 weeks. That was an article by Craig Williams.
From Herald Scotland, Monday 9th of September 2024, from the STEM section of the business section. Brain sensor breakthrough can transform neurological care. Article by Helen McArdle. Advances in brain sensor technology could transform how doctors monitor patients with chronic neurological conditions, according to new research. Scientists from Edinburgh University said that emerging developments in semiconductor technology, which can detect and process brain signals locally, could unlock new medical interventions through the use of bioimplants in the brain. The discovery could pave the way to comparatively low-cost, real-time tracking of brain activity in patients who have been paralysed or experienced impairment to sensory functions, such as speech, as a result of a spinal injury or stroke. The devices, known as brain-computer interfaces, BCIs, are currently used to recognise a person's thought patterns, which are transmitted to a computer via sensors attached to the scalp. This information is then decoded electronically to instruct a desired action, such as a prosthetic limb movement. However, current technologies require huge amounts of energy and computer power just to analyse a single brain signal. This restricts patient care to clinical settings and limits a clinician's ability to deliver prompt, accurate and local medical intervention. A team of researchers, led by the Centre for Electronics Frontiers at Edinburgh University, in partnership with the universities of Bar Ilan, Israel and Padova, Italy, created a new BCI technology that uses nanotechnology. This capability enables enhanced brain monitoring through memristors, an emerging semiconductor technology that mimics brain synapses by integrating processing with memory. Memristors can compress vast quantities of data into essential information with minimal power consumption. They are minuscule in size and can be integrated into standard microchips for enhanced processing. whilst minimising the energy usage and making them ideal for implantable applications. The team recorded the memory functions of a freely moving rat, trained to associate a particular sound with a reward. The rat's brain activity was then interfaced with Edinburgh's memristor technology, which demonstrated that it can detect and process the rat's brain signals in real time. All procedures were approved by the Bar Ilan University Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. This finding demonstrates that power-efficient nanotechnologies can be successfully implemented with BCI technologies, thus providing new directions for biomedical research and future monitoring of neurological conditions. The results have been published in the journal Science Advances. The study was funded by the UK's Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Centre, EPSRC. The work was led by Caterina Spandati, a PhD student in the Centre for Electronics Frontiers at Edinburgh University's School of Engineering. She said, "By using an interdisciplinary collaborative approach between engineering and biological sciences, we successfully integrated brain-machine interfacing technologies with emerging electronics, thus providing new directions for biomedical research." Themis Podromakis, Regius Professor for the Centre of Electronics Frontiers, added, "Never before has the link between biology and engineering been so strong. This study is a great example of how the advancement of semiconductor devices and energy-efficient AI hardware at the Centre for Electronics Frontiers can unlock new medical interventions, transforming modern society through emerging technologies." And that article was written by Helen McArdle. From Herald Scotland, Monday 9th of September 2024, from the STEM section of the business section. Flow of investment into Scottish businesses on the rise. Article by Christy Dorsey. The amount of venture capital money going into Scottish companies rose by more than a third in the first half of this year as investor sentiment picked up across the UK. The latest Private Enterprise Venture Pulse report from accountancy group KPMG shows that 23 firms in Scotland shared funding of £85.3 million during the second quarter, taking the total for the first 6 months of the year to £184 million. That was a 39% increase on the first half of 2023, even though the total number of companies receiving funding remained static at 42. Standout deals during the second quarter included £13 million for Edinburgh-based Prothea Technologies, which is developing technologies to see and treat diseased lung tissue in a single procedure. Stirling-based IGII, formerly known as Integrated Graphene, raised £8.8 million, and Dundee biotech Outrun TX secured £10 million. We're seeing continued investment in firms across Scotland, and I hope that we continue to see investment of a similar or larger size for the remainder of 2024, said Amy Burnett, KPMG's Senior Manager in Scotland for Private Enterprise. Whilst we are not experiencing a big uptick in VC money deployed, I remain hopeful for a calmer second half to the year, now we have a new UK government in place. I'm pleased to see continued investment in exciting technologies in Scotland that are solving real-world problems, and I look forward to watching these businesses grow. Across the whole of the UK, the survey showed that the amount of money raised in the second quarter was more than double the total in the first 3 months of this year. After a quiet opening to the year that saw just £3 billion in VC funding raised by UK businesses, the lowest amount seen in 22 quarters, activity picked up dramatically in the second quarter, with £6.9 billion raised. This was also up year on year on the £4.7 billion raised in the second quarter of 2023, as investor sentiment improved, according to data supplied by PitchBook. Graham Williams, Head of Corporate Finance M&A in Scotland for KPMG, added, "Scotland's figures continue to be strong in the second quarter, and with more stable market conditions, hopefully investment levels continue to grow during the final 2 quarters of the year. And that article was written by Christy Dorsey. From Herald Scotland, Monday 9th of September 2024, from the STEM section of the business section. Glasgow scientists use AI to reveal new details on viruses. Article by Helen McArdle. Glasgow scientists have used artificial intelligence to unravel never-before-seen details about viruses, potentially paving the way to new vaccines. Working with colleagues based in Sydney, researchers at Glasgow University's Centre for Virus Research, CVR, used AI protein structure predictions to examine hundreds of species in the Flaviviridae, a large family of viruses that cause diseases such as dengue, Zika, and hepatitis C. There is currently no vaccine for Hep C. The scientists behind the study believe their findings could change that. The work reveals important insights into how viruses evolve and sheds light on the entry mechanisms used by viruses to get into the body and replicate in cells. It is one of the first times that AI protein structure prediction has been used in this way in virology, creating a new resource for other investigators. The AI technology, AlphaFold and ESMFold, developed by Google DeepMind and Meta, was used to discover and classify the entry proteins of all the viruses tested. This would be impossible to do with traditional methods. The researchers say their findings are an important step forward for future pandemic preparedness and current viral threats such as Mpox, for which scientists currently know very little about the entry proteins. During the COVID pandemic, scientists harnessed existing knowledge of the spike protein SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, to quickly develop vaccines. However, for many viruses, including hepatitis C, the shape and mechanism of the viral entry proteins are unknown. This research demonstrates for the first time that hepatitis C has a completely novel entry mechanism, unlike other viruses. Dr. Joe Grove, Senior Lecturer at the MRC University of Glasgow Centre for Virus Research, said the team are hugely excited by the results of the study, which was funded by the Wellcome Trust, Royal Society and Medical Research Council, MRC. He said, "We are one of the first research groups to apply this AI technology at scale to viruses, and the results have huge implications for understanding how viruses get into our bodies and replicate, something which is currently important for future vaccine development, pandemic preparedness, and furthering our knowledge of potential spillover viruses. By discovering more about the entry proteins on the outside of viruses, as we've done, we can better understand the fundamentals of viral biology, which in turn can guide development of drugs or vaccines." Dr. Grove added, "We are particularly excited about the discoveries about the entry proteins of hepatitis C. There is currently no vaccine for hepatitis C, so we are hopeful that our new understanding of this virus's entry mechanism will help lead to the development of a new vaccine. Going forward, we want to use this technology to scale up our research to thousands of viruses. By doing this, we can build foundational knowledge to inform our responses to existing and new viral diseases." And that article was written by Helen McArdle. From Herald Scotland, Monday 9th of September 2024, from the STEM section of the business section. Investing in Scotland's future through the space sector. Article by Nicola Douglas, Scottish National Investment Bank. From the Enlightenment to world-changing inventions, Scotland often punches above its weight, so it is of little surprise, but also lots of pride, that our nation is playing a leading role in the global space sector, currently generating £180 million in income per year. The global space market is expected to hit $1 trillion by 2040, and Scotland's space sector is on a remarkable trajectory to capitalise on this new physical and economic frontier. With over 150 companies employing more than 8,000 people, the industry has already become a critical driver of innovation, economic growth and job creation. However, as global competition intensifies and the technological challenge increases in complexity, the continued success of Scotland's space industry should not be taken for granted. The sector has enormous growth potential, but it is also a capital-intensive industry. Refining and scaling technical innovation to be commercially viable is an expensive undertaking in any industry. Add building and launching rockets to this and the costs can be sky high. To maintain and build on the momentum of Scotland's space industry, sustained long-term investment is essential. There will be hurdles to overcome. A great degree of patience and patience capital is required. The Scottish National Investment Bank is looking forward to attending the premier global space industry event, Spacecom Expo, on September 11th and 12th. The event is to the commercial space sector what the Cannes Film Festival is to the film industry, a premier, unifying moment for key players to come together, and this year it takes place in Glasgow. This is more than just a showcase. It is an opportunity to reaffirm Scotland's commitment to staying at the forefront of global space technology and attracting the global investment needed to match our ambitions. As Scotland's development bank, the Scottish National Investment Bank exists to provide patient, long-term capital for businesses and projects that support the development of a fairer and more sustainable economy. As an impact investor, we can take a longer-term innovative view on emerging and developing sectors such as this one. We have been an early and sustained investor in Forres headquartered orbital launch company Orbex. In layman's terms, Orbex builds and launches rockets carrying satellites into space. But the company is unique in developing environmentally sustainable rocket technology, using renewable biofuels to power its rockets. This was one of the key elements of interest and alignment to the bank. Orbex's approach aligns to our mission to scale up innovation to improve our economy as well as our mission to support our net zero transition. By harnessing our skilled workforce, world-class research institutions and a collaborative funding ecosystem, Scotland has emerged as a leader in areas such as small satellite technology. The technologies being developed in Scotland's space sector have the potential to address some of the most pressing challenges facing our planet. As we welcome the global space community to Glasgow, let's reaffirm our commitment to leading in space technology. With the right investments, Scotland can continue to push innovation and sustainability on the global stage. And that article was written by Nicola Douglas, who is the Executive Director at the Scottish National Investment Bank. From Herald Scotland, Monday 9th of September 2024, from the STEM section of the business section. Shares surge in Scots tech star amid bright outlook in US. Article by Scott Wright. Shares in Craneware, the software specialist focused on the US healthcare market, closed up nearly 8% after annual results beat expectations, and the firm declared investments made over recent years are coming to fruition. Analysts upgraded revenue forecasts for the Edinburgh-based firm after it reported a 9% increase in revenue to $189.3 million, ahead of guidance, and highlighted an increasing opportunity to drive sales. The company's profits rose by 20% to $15.7 million. Craneware highlighted an increasingly supportive market backdrop across the Atlantic, where healthcare providers are looking to deliver value-based care and a strong market response to its core Trezus platform. It reported high levels of customer retention and the potential of its strategic alliance with IT giant Microsoft, which the company said is helping to extend its market reach through its Tresus offering being marketed on the Microsoft Azure marketplace. And Craneware signalled its prospects are unlikely to be derailed by November's US election, as Chief Executive Keith Nielsen said both the Democrats and Republicans have a bipartisan commitment to improving healthcare, albeit they differ on how to deliver that goal. The positive is seeing the fruits of our labour over the last few years all coming together, and we are starting to see some real good progress and momentum continuing into this year as well, Mr. Nielsen told the Herald. Analysts reacted positively to the results and Craneware's prospects for further growth. Peel Hunt noted that the company's products can help healthcare providers deal with challenges such as staffing shortages, rising regulatory demands, and cutting costs while maintaining quality of care, as it upgraded its forecasts for the company. Having talked to management and taking into account commentary from other peers in the US health tech space, we are, for the first time in a while, pushing through some small upgrades to revenue, plus 3% FY25E and FY26E, it said in a note for investors. We believe we are the start of an upgrade cycle similar to the mid-2010s. Asked to comment on the general health of the US economy following recent concerns over the labour market, Mr. Nielsen said that, generally it is an improving picture for our hospitals and our customers. Healthcare is probably a little bit different in that it doesn't feel like the election is going to massively affect healthcare from what we can see. Both parties have been a little bit light on detail on their healthcare policies, but it feels like both are striving to get better value in healthcare, which is generally seen as being supportive of the hospital environment. We are seeing that as being improvements. We are 16 months past the end of the healthcare emergency, and I think people are definitely seeing improvements, and that is being reflected in our sales profile. We have a good, healthy mix of both products and size of deals coming through. No heavy dependency on any one area, which I like. Everyone is worried, as they are in this country, about the cost of living and prices, but other than that, I think generally things feel like they have turned a little bit of a corner. Craneware proposed a final dividend of 16 pence per share, giving a total dividend for the year of 29 pence per share, up 2% on last year. Mr. Nielsen said, "The strong financial results during the year demonstrate the strength of the Tresus platform. Our increasing platform partnership successes and the role we play in helping healthcare providers drive for better value in the US healthcare market. We see increased opportunity ahead. Our alliance with Microsoft will allow us to accelerate innovation and explore new AI-based applications in an efficient manner which, alongside the breadth of the Tresus platform, our unique data assets and our considerable and extensive customer base provides significant scope for expansion in the size of our addressable market. We approach this opportunity from a position of strength and resilience with a strong balance sheet, high levels of recurring revenue, and consistently high customer retention rates. This gives us the confidence and the ability to continue investing for growth to secure our long-term market position." Shares in Craneware closed up by 160 pence, or 7.8%, at 2,230 pence. And that article was written by Scott Wright. From Herald Scotland, Monday 9th of September 2024, from the STEM section of the business section. Technology. Add a touch of vintage with VQ Hepburn voice. Article by Sean Dimmock. What is it? A Bluetooth speaker blending vintage aesthetics and modern functionality. Good points. Wrapped in premium PU leather, the speaker is available in 4 distinct designs from renowned British brands: Cath Kidston, Emma Bridgewater, Jules and Laura Ashley. Each design exudes a sense of nostalgia, blending retro charm with contemporary flair, making Hepburn Voice as much a decorative piece as it is a functional device. Audio performance is impressive, thanks to dual ultra-wide full-range 10-watt speakers, which coupled with neodymium magnet drivers give high-quality sound with deep bass and clear treble. Adjustable EQ options allow users to personalize the acoustics, tailoring the sound profile to their specific preferences. The device utilizes Amazon Alexa to bring the power of voice-activated control of the device without having to lift a finger or smartphone. In terms of connectivity, the Hepburn Voice offers Bluetooth and aux-in options, ensuring that it can pair seamlessly with a variety of devices or allow a direct cable connection. The USB charging port is a thoughtful inclusion, allowing you to charge your devices directly from the speaker, a handy feature when your phone or tablet needs a power boost. Powering the Hepburn Voice is a rechargeable 6,600 mAh battery, offering up to 8 hours of continuous playback on a single charge. Bad points? The low-profile tack-style buttons on top may be fiddly for those with broad fingers. Best for those who appreciate both style and substance. Whether you're hosting a gathering or simply enjoying music at home, avoid if you are a minimalist advocate who prefers studio equipment to be heard and not seen. Score 9 out of 10. VQ Hepburn Voice, £89.99 from myrq.co.uk, and that article was written by Sean Dimmock. From Herald Scotland, Monday 9th of September 2024, from the STEM section of the business section. The Industrial Revolution gets set to go into orbit. Article by Christy Dorsey. The continuing rise of artificial intelligence will soon see the deployment of data centres into outer space, where they can be powered by endless solar energy without further contributing to Earth's global warming. Scottish businessman Will Whitehorn, a former president of Virgin Galactic, said this will be the next stage in the Industrial Revolution taking place across the commercial space sector. It will be the focus of next week's Spacecom Expo in Glasgow. An estimated 3,000 delegates from around the world will gather at the SEC Events Campus, where Mr. Whitehorn will play host as executive chair of the event. Satellites are incredibly useful, but the next part of this industrial revolution is going to be putting technology in space that currently uses a lot of energy on the planet, he said. The first one of those technologies to go in space will be data centres. Because of the AI revolution, data centres are increasing. Even now, the amount of energy they use is a bigger contributor to the carbon output of the world than aviation, for example. That's one of the industries that can easily go into space. It is hoped that Scotland's end-to-end capability, spanning rocket construction and launch pads to satellite manufacturing and downstream data applications, will allow the country to capture a meaningful slice of a global market that the World Economic Forum has estimated will grow to £1.4 trillion by 2035, up from £490 billion last year. Space-related enterprise currently generates more than £250 million in annual revenues in Scotland, with about 8,500 people employed in upstream and downstream activities. Securing a piece of that market has the potential to transform Scotland's economy, Mr. Whitehorn said. I do think that it is possible because this industry is very new and it relies on intellectual capability, he explained. One of the things the UK excels in is science academia, and this is one of the areas where science academia is working hand in hand with new style small companies, and that can achieve quite a lot more than the kind of investment needed for industrial production that Scotland was pursuing in the 1990s. Referring to Elon Musk's SpaceX program in the US, Mr. Whitehorn added, "You don't need to be the world leader in rocket launch. Our rocket launch can be the specialised stuff going from Shetland, where we have the unique position to enter satellites into polar orbit, as it's called. The UK has not got the largest space industry in the world. We know where that is. The largest space industry in the world is in the United States, and the largest government expenditure is in the United States. But this country punches well above its weight, and Scotland punches very well above its weight, and Scottish academia is very involved in the development of exploration around the world. 5 of the UK's 7 declared spaceports are in Scotland, and of these, 4 are in the Highlands and Islands. The most advanced is Saxavord in Shetland, which is currently Western Europe's only fully licensed vertical rocket launch facility, and is aiming for its inaugural liftoff by the end of this year. Launch services company Orbex makes its prime rockets at its headquarters in Moray, and is also in charge of the Sutherland Spaceport on the Amoyne Peninsula on the north coast of Scotland. Another manufacturer, Skyrora, makes its 3-stage XL rockets at its factory in Cumbernauld. Meanwhile, Glasgow designs and builds more small satellites than anywhere outside of California, thanks in large part to the activities of Clyde Space, which has been owned by Sweden's AAC Microtech since 2018. Scotland is also home to an array of downstream companies that use the data collected from space for a variety of purposes, while the country's academics are helping in the development of technology for deep space missions. These and other Scottish achievements will be one of the major themes at Spacecom, Mr. Whitehorn said, along with a focus on the new technologies that are being applied in the commercial sector. Space is undergoing an industrial revolution, and the thing about industrial revolutions is that nobody notices them until they are quite a long way underway, he said. Nobody noticed the steamships when they first started going up and down the Clyde in the 1820s. By the 1850s, they had transformed shipping. The space industrial revolution hasn't really picked up yet by the general public, but it's beginning to be picked up by governments. The amount of government money going into space outside of America is rocketing at the moment. Mr. Whitehorn has previously served as chairman of Clyde Space and currently holds that same position at Seraphim Space Investment Trust, which launched in July 2021 and is currently valued at about £116 million on the London Stock Exchange. Its portfolio spans 32 businesses that are predominantly privately financed, almost half of which are in the UK. He said it is more difficult to raise money for a space company in Europe than in North America, but the investment environment is improving as countries such as the UK, France, Germany and Italy have increased their government space budgets. The market has also been invigorated by a number of private equity deals coming out of the US, such as the 2023 acquisition of Germany's OHB by venture capital group KKR. I think the environment for investing in companies in Scotland, for example, is improving, Mr. Whitehorn added. In June of this year, the Scottish Space Network announced a collaboration with New York advisory firm Sustainable Alpha to secure opportunities for the global investment community to back early-stage space technology companies in this country and further afield. Mr. Whitehorn said this type of global approach is necessary for Scotland to become a key hub in the international sector. The one thing the UK and Scotland cannot do is dominate the industry, he said. We just don't have the scale and scope, but we could become the incredibly important niche player. And that article was written by Christy Dorsey. The article was read today by me, Bob.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 10th of September 2024, from the Voices section. The SNP are a danger to Scotland's most vulnerable people. This article is by Kevin McKenna. In the first decade of devolution, a tale unfolded about how the Scottish liberal elites routinely trample over the basic human rights of marginalised communities when they decide they're not just worth the hassle. In 2005, the Labour-led government had lost an appeal against a prisoner's compensation for being forced to slop out, a practice in which inmates use buckets in their cells as toilets. The prisoner had been awarded £2,450 after successfully arguing that the practice breached his rights under the European Convention on Human Rights. It also emerged that the government had been warned repeatedly about the disgusting conditions inside some jails, including slopping out, but had chosen to ignore them. They had even been given a substantial EU grant to end slopping out, but had opted to spend this money elsewhere. The resultant flood of similar claims, more than 1,000, eventually cost the government millions of pounds more than the cash they'd received to fix the problem. 4 years later, by which time the SNP had come to power, a tawdry deal was struck between Scotland and the UK to stop inmates receiving compensation for slopping out. Emergency laws were railroaded through Westminster and Holyrood to introduce a 1-year time bar on claims. By then, compensation claims had amounted to more than £11 million, and almost £70 million had been set aside for future claims. Now, you may hold a rather different view about such matters than me, that when offenders lose their liberty, they should also lose their human rights. I prefer to be led by Sir Winston Churchill on this matter. In a speech to the House of Commons in 1910 about the treatment of crime and criminals, the then Home Secretary said, "The mood and temper of the public in regard to the treatment of crime and criminals is one of the most unfailing tests of the civilization of any country. The callous disregard for those whom the political classes in Scotland deem to be less than fully human has been evident throughout the entire devolution era. It reveals a troubling mindset, that poor or otherwise very vulnerable people are less likely to have the funds, knowledge and connections to defend themselves. Moreover, they are less likely to vote and possess little of the lobbying power required to access political decision-makers. The bulk of these across Scotland and the UK are still skewed in favour of corporate interests, university-educated culture warriors, and boutique middle-class progressives whose radicalism is measured in pronouns and artisan coffee consumption. This was evident last week, when the Daily Record revealed that the Scottish Government had casually owned up to spending a £97 million Westminster grant to fix unsafe cladding post-Grenfell on other projects. 7 years after the Grenfell disaster, in which 72 people lost their lives, ministers still don't know how many buildings are affected in Scotland. This seemed to be emblematic of the callous disregard for the lives of poor people distressingly outlined in Sir Martin Moore-Bick's 1,700-page report into the Grenfell fire. This highlighted escalating spirals of failure across government and embedded private sector interests. Among the many previous warnings about the quality of cladding materials in the years before Grenfell were those following a fire at Garnock Court in Irvine. As in other instances across the UK, cladding found to be flammable wasn't banned because it had met the then British safety standards. The class-based disregard of our civic authorities for marginalised groups and communities has also become evident in the customs and practices of Police Scotland. Our National Law and Order Agency says that its purpose is to improve the safety and well-being of people, places and communities in Scotland, focusing on keeping people safe in lines with our values of integrity, fairness and respect, and with human rights at the heart of everything we do. Such lofty aspirations, though, do not apply to women living inside Scotland's women's prison estate. In a letter to Holyrood's Citizen Participation and Public Petitions Committee, the force insisted that allowing individuals charged or convicted of rape or attempted rape to self-declare their sex fosters a strong sense of belonging. For the avoidance of doubt, thousands of years of science and the overwhelming majority of reasonable people know that individuals charged or convicted of rape or attempted rape have penises, and as such are adult human males. The Herald's political editor, Andrew Learmonth, revealed that the policy analysis group, Murray Blackburn Mackenzie, had submitted a petition in 2021 expressing concerns that an offender who was born male but self-identifies as female would be recorded in crime statistics as female. The group had warned that allowing men to identify as women would skew those figures, and that recording sex accurately matters for data accuracy and trust in official statistics, public policy, media reporting, research, and for trust in public bodies. Police Scotland insisted, though, that their approach was consistent with the values of the organisation. What this means, then, is that Scotland's national police force believes that the feelings of rapists should be given priority over their female victims. Police Scotland know more than anyone else that the overwhelming majority of women in Scotland's criminal justice system are there owing to complex mental health needs, addiction problems rooted in coercive and abusive relationships, and financial crises arising from this. If Police Scotland think these women's needs must be subordinate to those of violent men, then the organisation is not fit for purpose. This sinister targeting of our most deprived and marginalised groups now forms part of the DNA of the Scottish Government. Its favoured agencies and public sector glove puppets earn too much money to risk it all by pushing back on something they know to be truly wicked. Nowhere is this more conspicuous than in Scotland's multi-million-pound addiction recovery sector. Here, the failed policies of a swollen suite of high-earning executives and government ministers have condemned thousands of poor Scots to premature deaths caused by addiction. Their anointed lifestyles rest on excluding those who have a genuine care for victims of addiction, like Anne-Marie Ward, founder of FAVOR, F-A-V-O-R, Faces and Voices of Recovery. Last month, Miss Ward admitted defeat in her struggle to force the SNP and their addiction moguls to do the right thing. Her parting condemnation of them applies across many areas of Scottish public life. They have spent millions creating an addiction industry employing a vast army whose focus is harm reduction instead of recovery. For years I have spoken up about the spin, the lies, the pulling the wool over the public's eyes. I can't stomach it a moment longer. That article was by Kevin McKenna.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels, review, and to tell your friends about our service.